the webinar. We are here due to American TESOL. We are here every Friday. You can go to americantesol.com and learn about our certification programs and teaching English to children, also teaching English with technology, and also our TESOL Advanced course, all certifications. Um, Brought to you by American TESOL. I'm Shelly Sanchez Terrell, and today we're going to talk about learning with the news, how your students can learn with news resources where they act as where they tell the news, they write the news, they speak the news, and also they're able to summarize information, do research, which is all really, really great for language learners. So when you are talking about teaching with the news, there are plenty of sites out there that take everyday current events or news items or news resources, and they have your language learners of any age. So there are resources for very young learners. If you're teaching children, I'm going to show you some of those resources, all the way to teaching adolescents, teens, and even adults. So there are websites that you can download entire lesson plans. They have quizzes, they have vocabulary exercises, and of course, I'm going to show you how you can get your students to be able to report the news, either through video, or if you don't want your students to, or you have limited technology, then you can always get them to just write the news like a journalist. One of the most famous people in the world when it comes to news or writing is Joseph Pulitzer. And he says, I like this quote, which is great for your students to see this quote. You can show them this quote when they're writing the news, because news is a little bit different than writing fiction, writing stories. And we have webinars about digital storytelling, but when you write the news, he says you have to do it clearly. It has to be brief. It's not a long expose. It can be a long expose. You can, if you're teaching adults or college students, you definitely can have them write a very, very long, longer than a 5-paragraph essay. A lot of times now, especially with social media, we have a lot of people who want to see images to go along with their news. So they can be photojournalists as well. And then also that it is accurate. And I think that's really important, because sometimes our students, the way they summarize or the way they interpret different news, that's going to change what the story is about. So when we look at the news, one of the reasons why it's great to learn with the news is because you use all of your skills when you are learning the news, and it covers every single subject matter. So it doesn't matter if you teach math, it doesn't matter if you teach science, it doesn't matter if you teach English, it doesn't matter if you teach Spanish, Greek, anything that you teach, they have resources, usually in that language, about that news item, or they do have newspapers around the world that share news. So it makes such a great, yeah, exactly. It covers every subject from sports. You can have PE news. You can have, so in every classroom you can have where they research current events for that particular topic, science, math, engineering, everything. And the reason you want to get your students to read, listen, watch, and digest that news is because it also keeps them on top of their field. So, for example, if you have students that are learning biology and you have different magazines that are news resources, or now podcasts. One of my favorite podcasts comes out every Friday. In fact, it's probably on right now here, but it's called Science Friday. And so if your students listen to the news or they read a little section, there's also a section in the newspaper that I read often that shows the news. It shows the latest about whatever's in the news. Like, for example, you may have not known that there has been the discovery of another dwarf planet. Now I know that. And you may not know what a dwarf planet is either, but I know this. Because if your students are looking at current events, they're always on top of their field. They always know what is the latest learning, what is the latest changes in a field. And that is something a book cannot do. Because we saw many textbooks where, of course, yes, Science Friday is a podcast, but you do see that there was a lot of books that had Pluto as a planet, and then they changed Pluto, and so they're always changing in the news, and so it's great to have your students look at the news and be able to read and research, and also they improve their listening skills if it's a podcast. If they recite the news, then they improve their speaking, and of course they will improve their reading and writing by listening, reading the news, but also providing news as well, giving the news. So there's different formats. We have newspapers. I'm going to show you a lot to do with mostly newspapers, and also this can be translated to e-zines. E-zines are online magazines. You also have TV, radio, magazines, vodcasts, and podcasts. So there's news that we have on paper. One of the great things is at my college, I always have a lesson or a reading I can take to the students because we have our student newspaper on campus. So if I'm ever, the copy machine doesn't work or anything like that, I just grab one of our publications. We also have a magazine for students. So I can get an article from any of those, and that's recent news, and that makes a good reading. So that's really great. So there's still a lot of print. You can still get a lot of, sometimes in countries they have free papers. If you go around, they'll have free newspapers, magazines that could be age appropriate and share news with your students. But of course, there's always podcasts that are great for listening exercises. You can find also little clips on YouTube that show that's what a video cast is, where it's little clips on YouTube. And you can see this with young learners giving the news on YouTube. A lot of classes, some classes around the world do this. And then they also have where they have it for adults, and all kinds of students do this. So you can show that if you want. So one of the best resources I think that I really enjoy a lot is Newsela.com. Now, Newsela, one of the reasons why I like Newsela so much is because if you look at Newsela, it gives you different sections. You have opinions, you have war and peace, you have science, you have money, you have law, you have health, you have different sections. The kids section is really fantastic. Because it's one of the few places that has the news for kids, but you can also get for adults. So here I chose news and opinion. Now, when you look at it, it gives you the grade level. So the grade level, I know in many countries, you're not at a level, but if you look at first, if you click on one, then that's going to be children that are the age of about 6, 7. And then, of course, all the way to 11, 12, and 13, which is going to be adults and college students. So you can pick the reading level of the news item. They have it in different levels. They also have reading standards. So they try to match it up with standards from schools. They also give you the hearts. So they let you know which one, what are the most popular news items in each section. For every single reading, you have over here where you can translate it in Spanish. So that's really nice if you're teaching a dual language, bilingual, or if you're teaching in Spanish, then that's one way. They have always a writing prompt. If you click write, then they'll get, so you get the news item. It's a short reading at the level of your students, intermediate. They also have the length. This is the length. So how many words which I really like, because when I have to print out the news, then I go for the shorter one. Sometimes I have to print it out for my students, and here we have a paper limit, so I only get so many pages that I can print a semester. And so that helps me, if in case we don't have access to computers, I can print this out. They also have where the writing prompt that you can just tell your student. Um, I put it as a writing journal prompt. A lot of times we have writing prompts in the class every day, so I think that's really good. And then, of course, you get a quiz. Your students can take an online quiz that's automatically graded. If you get the premium account, it'll automatically put in your grade book and everything like that. So Newsela just has really gone above and beyond. Currently, they're doing a whole entire curriculum on the elections. So now they have where students can vote online for the U.S. election. It could be any student around the world. So if you're teaching the U.S. election, look at the Newsela resources, and you'll find a lot of great resources. The other site that has some really great lesson plans and ideas that come with the news and teach digital literacy is Newseum. So Newseum, I really like the Newseum, because Newseum used to have where they had all the newspaper colors, the covers from around the world. I cannot find that resource anymore, but they have several other resources. They recently, thanks Peggy for sharing that. Yes, Newsela is still free, but they also have the premium account. So with the standard, the basic, you can get you can still see the quizzes, you can still see the writing prompt, but you wouldn't be able to get, for example, the grades and everything like that. I think your students have to report them or something. Newseum has tons of new resources if you go to Ed Ideas, and so you have to keep scrolling down to see all of them. But one of my favorite ones is, for example, they have teach your students how to analyze primary resources. So with Newseum, you actually get to see different newspapers from around the world. Another one they have in this section is where you can, they've taken old newspapers from the 50s, the 60s, and what they've done is they showed you how the same news item with different journalists, how they made mistakes, how they made grammar errors. So that could be really cool, because you can show it online, and what it says is you can, when you look at it online, your students can try and find the grammar mistakes in those news items. And that's kind of cool, because then they can see that even journalists, professionals make mistakes as well. They also have, this one is really great. So what they do is they cover, they compare news coverage. So since Newseum is a museum, it's like an online museum that collects news, and it's collect news for many, many years. They have old newspaper scan. So they compare the coverage. So you can show your students different ways the news is reported. And in this particular one, they're doing Brown versus the Board of Education. So I'll probably use this with my students. And your students get to decide which was the most accurate, fair. They choose. And of course you don't tell them, it's up to them who they who what reporters they think from the past really did a good job on this, and which ones they think might have been biased, might have been working for a political party. I mean, so they get to make these kind of judgments. So I think it's really good. They have tons of lessons like this. A very popular one among language learners, and they recently got an update as well. I think in the last 2 weeks or month, is Sean Banfield's BreakingNewsEnglish.com. I've already used this with my students. My students, they pick one of the articles they like. The great thing about this site is it gives you levels. You can have level 1, 2, or 3. So one's going to be, of course, your lowest level, beginners, and then the other levels, 3, of course, will be the highest. You have it in different sections. You can do a listening. So Sean will speak in different accents. He'll do it in American English, he'll do it in British English. He's not American. Sean's a really good friend of mine. So him and I have actually met each other in person, and which was very exciting. He has so many resources. You can print it. Each one has a PDF of lessons. He has tons of really great lessons. He has group lessons, he has pair lessons, he has quizzes, and he has online games. He has reading games, he has grammar games, he has spelling games, and then also vocabulary. So there's tons and tons on Sean's site. It makes a complete lesson. For homework, I have sometimes I'll get my students, if they get homework, but they are research one of the most current events on Sean's site, and then they play a game that they send me. They send me the results of their games that they played, a couple of the games. They do the listening, and they also get to practice, and they like it. They really do like Sean's site. Now, if you teach younger learners, then you might like Time for Kids. Timeforkids.com has so many awesome resources. So if you teach young learners, this is one of the best resources for teaching the news with young learners, because they have kid reporters. So they do show their kid. These are articles, these are videos, also recordings of kids interviewing different people. This also is of students in the news as well. So it's not only reporters, kids reporting, interviewing, writing articles, which is really, really great. But it's also, of course, showing and highlighting kids from around the world. They'll do, for example, Olympics. They'll do something like they'll do science inventors, kid inventors. So it's really inspiring if you're teaching young learners to see, and it's all around the world. You can click around the world. I know a lot of times the news resources can be US centric, maybe. So I really like that museum, even Newsela. A lot of these sites are not just US centric. You can find news. If you do a search for your country, you should be able to find something about that. It also has one of the best things that I like about Time for Kids is, of course, they have this homework help. So I think the homework help is a little secret section there that you probably wouldn't see if you didn't look. But Homework Helper is not just for kids too. It has all these incredible resources for you. So it has an online flashcard maker where your students can make different flashcards. If you go to Grammar Wizard, the Grammar Wizard has games to teach your students grammar. They also have, I didn't show everything it has, but it has games with writing tips. It has writing tips for young learners on how to create a paper, how to edit a paper. They have things on how to do sentence structure. I mean, they have so many resources under Homework Helper. You could use this as an online lesson plan as well. I sometimes get the computer lab with my students so I can have them go in, and then we can do something like one of the activities. And these are very good activities. Or they can make their own flashcards, or when they're writing their own papers, and we write papers, then they're able to get some tips for that. So timeforkids.com, the homework helper section is one of the best sections they have. Alongside Time for Kids, there's also another website for kids that deals with just um, sports related news. Now I didn't put it here because we don't have tons of time. We only have 30 minutes, but you can go to sikids.com, Sports Illustrated Kids, and you can find a lot of news from students and kids, and also about kids in sports on Sports Illustrated Kids. Now it doesn't really have as many activities and stuff, so that's why I didn't put it on there. But I put the website up, Sports Illustrated for Kids, and you'll find the bookmarks. The other activity I like a lot too is the BBC has tons of news resources. So I'm going to show you 3 or 4 from the BBC. One of them is bite-sized English. Now, it looks like it's only about non-fiction, but actually you click news story, and then you're going to find this interactive that actually goes through the sections of a newspaper. It looks like it's to create a news source, but it's not. What it does is you have to choose the right title. It's almost like an interactive quiz. So what your students do is they choose the right title, the right article, and the right picture for the news. So they get to choose from different ones. And when they get it right, it shows them that. So that's a good site to kind of teach them about the different sections in the news, and also to teach them flow and coherence, to teach them, for example, what makes a good title to support their article. And I know, especially, I know with my students, that's very helpful. That's something they definitely have to learn, is how to make better titles for their writing. And then the image, to make sure that the images really match what they are saying. Yes, this one, Susanna, is only in English, the BBC one. Sorry about that, but I think Museum has actually newspapers around the world in different languages. At least they used to. They used to have covers around the world, the same news, but in different languages. So if you're looking for other languages other than English, then you want to look at Museum. And Newsela does it in other language, in Spanish as well. Yes, the nonfiction, it's not updated, but I recently used this week or last week I used the one that I showed you, and it did work, so that's good. So the BBC also has a feature called News Report. A news report will let you click, and it's a listening exercise. It even gives instructions for your students to listen. Step 2, learn keywords, and then it goes through the different steps. It gives a transcript, it gives answers, it gives how they quiz, and they can quiz themselves, and how they can learn with different news reports. And then this is a listening exercise. The BBC also has Lingo Hack, and Lingo Hack is more a video. They have the headlines, the most recent headlines. They have a transcript that goes with it. They focus on vocabulary, so you'll see a lot of vocabulary highlighted. You also can download a PDF, and you can download the audio, so that can be a listening as well. And you can see here, I added it for October the 12th, which is very, very recent. So they do update this pretty regularly. News and levels. I know Herm had mentioned that. That's a good site as well. You have where you can have level 1, level 2, and level 3. You get a video. It's video news. It's something they can watch. And then there's usually, they give them, at the bottom, they give them tips. You don't get quizzes or anything like the other sites. That's why these are more at the bottom. But they do give suggestions for students on how to learn vocabulary and how to learn with the news. So I put that in there as well. And it does have their different levels. Level 1 being beginners. Level 3 being more advanced. learningenglish.voanews.com. This is a very long time resource. They have a picture, they have the news item, they put a podcast, they have the transcript, and once again, they also have at the bottom vocabulary words and tips on how to learn with their website. It doesn't have as many features as Breaking News English, and it doesn't have as many features as Newsela or Museum. Which is why these are more towards the bottom. But they're still really, really great listening and resources, and they have really great articles. This particular one is the most recent one. It talks about a man in Syria who goes to help children in Aleppo. So it has very recent news. When your students are learning about the news, there's different skills that they can learn. They learn about visual design, because news has templates. You set it up. You have to there's actually this news game that I was playing the other day. I didn't add it here, but what it does is it makes it to where you have to put the news in different sections and what the section is about. I found it kind of difficult, so that's why as far as like your students, imagining my students playing it seemed a little difficult, which is why I didn't put it up here. But they learn editing. Whenever you put up the news, that site I was showing you where it shows journalists who printed up errors. Definitely your students, if they have a newspaper and others are reading it, if I encourage you to do a class website, because your students aren't going to want to have their mistakes necessarily published. So that's good if you do a newspaper, a class newspaper. I'll show you things for that. They learn research because they have to. Unlike when you have a 5-paragraph essay, I notice my students will, Wikipedia or Google it. But what happens is that your students end up having to do more than one type of research, because then they're not going to get the news story right. Thank you for whoever posted cnnlearnenglish.com. That's one of the resources I have in the blog post that I didn't put up here, because you do have to sign up to be able to get all the features and things like that. Summarizing, they have to take a long. I have my students do interviews. I have my students read different research reports, look on Twitter to see the latest news. So right now, there's also this a lot of things happening in Iraq, and so you can't find that news necessarily online. The best news resources are happening on Twitter, from people who are going through the experience. So you can research a hashtag, and then your students summarize the information they get from this particular hashtag. Of course, there's writing, there's evaluating whether, which news do you use. There's so many primary resources, especially with social media. What is correct? What is, what is fiction? What is fact? What is not? What is tainted? You learn about cultures. There's a lot of world news now. There's things happening all over the world. And so your students can learn about the country. They can learn about geography, traditions. It's real world learning because it's what's happening in their world right now. Things that they need to know about that they're going to have to make decisions about when they're adults, or if they're adults already. It's all, in every news now around the world impacts everyone. It's no longer something that you do. So collaboration, they collaborate with each other. If one person is doing a news article, um, then somebody else can be the one who helps them edit, and so on and so forth. So the great thing about the news is you practice different forms of writing. You can practice where you're doing long writings, where you're doing, on tons of paragraphs, a whole entire expose, and it's headline news. Or you can do very short snippets. When you do a video news, when you act as a reporter, you'll notice that those are like 10 seconds, 6 seconds. It's small reporting versus if you're writing the news, then that's very long information. So if they're reporting the news live as a podcast or a video, then your students learn different skills, because then they're able to see the difference between, if they're doing a very short news items, and they have to pick the most important things of that news to share within 6 seconds, 20 seconds, however you give them. There's advertisements in the news, in magazines, e-zines, newspapers. Even YouTube news has advertisements. There's reviews. They can do food reviews, movie reviews, product reviews. There's all kinds of reviews they can do in the news. They can do different updates. They can do interviews, commentaries, reports, so many different things. They can write about the world. They can write about fashion. They can write about the newest inventions. They can write about other people. Right now, one of the top news, one of the things I like is the Twitter Moments. Twitter Moments has a lot of really incredible, now it even has listening. So you can actually, Twitter Moments actually has a voice. I don't know if you've heard of, if you click on Moments on Twitter, you find a lot of news, the top news around the world. And because it's tweets, it's in different languages. So Susanna, that would be a great resource. for news around the world. But they also have, of course, where they have they have where you can actually have like a podcast with pictures. It's almost like the Snapchat stories. It's really amazing that I found this on Twitter news. But the Twitter moments, the Twitter, that's where you click Twitter moments, and it gives different sections. But also Twitter moments will right now, for example, they have different kinds of resources on Bob Dylan winning the Pulitzer um, for literature. So they have different things that your students can learn about. Your students can learn about movies, they can create comics, business. So the great thing about also having an online paper or student newspaper is sometimes you're depending on the gender, your students are going to be interested in different things. So if you have a class newspaper, each of your students can decide each time you publish that online paper, and there's free resources to do that, what section they want to be a part of, which section. So the boys, some might want to do sports and they may want to write about sports. So in other words, you have a lesson or a unit where everyone has something they can write about and wants to write about. So students tend to get very excited about having a class newspaper. You can have them write their own news articles. I'm going to show you some free generators for that. So I'm going to go quickly because we've got we're a little over time, but this one's a free newspaper generator. It's Jaguar Paw. You don't have to register. Very simple. You put the newspaper name, a headline, the author, the picture, the article. Now, this is limited because you don't have to register, so you make it and then you have to save it. You usually save it as when you go to print as, and you print it as a PDF. Now, yeah, the premium account, of course, it lets you do all of those other features, but you don't have to register anything for them to just create this quick, fast. This takes 10 minutes for them to maybe make the article. The other one is also, this one is called Be a Reporter. And of course, you can find all these resources at shelleyterrell.com/news. And also americantesol.com, and then the news article if you do a search on news. So that one, yes, this is for very young learners, for children. Same thing, they don't have to register. They type the title of the newspaper below, their name, or they can make a fake name. They type the article and the title, and then they can print that out or they can save it as a PDF. Okay. The other one is Read, Write, Think. Read, Write, Think has an interactive. It talks about the printing press. It gives them the history of the printing press, and it gives you also lesson plans all the way from 5, 6-year-olds all the way to teenagers and in college. Fody. Now that's very interesting that you said Fody.com's not working today, because I used it 3 days ago and it worked. Some of these things. Fody's fantastic. It takes 5 minutes to do this lesson. Your students are just focusing on, of course, they just type in the title, they type in a few words. It doesn't do a whole entire article, so I put it last, but it's very simple to use. And now Fody has different things. They have where your students can practice writing English, small text, and they have a talking squirrel, tomato, owl, ninja, cat, and flowers. And those are really, really fun animations. You can create a school newspaper if you use esu.com. That's the best resources that has stayed around. You can also use, of course, I didn't put the Google template. It's in the article, but Google is now getting rid of templates soon. So I'm not sure where that template's going to go, but if you download it now, you should have it for later. You can also find one if you go to Canva and you go to PictoChart. They have templates for also the school newspaper. And then, of course, you can always use one called Flip Snack. So I don't have the sites, the URLs, but if you go and you Google any of those, you can find them. So and Flip Snack are the best ways to do a class newspaper, because you can actually add different things. Like here, this is what it looks like in issue, and then it reads like a paper. So it's the best free resource I have seen to make. It doesn't give you a template, but it allows you to put it index. It allows you to put like a real newspaper. You can make it look like a print newspaper. This is one from students. You know, they have the picture. You can lay it out. So if you want a true newspaper that you do once a year or every 6 months, or however you want to do it as a class newspaper, where it has a section for, you know, the sports, it has here the fun zone, could be the comics. They can have different sections, or an e-zine. We call these online magazines an e-zine. Then this is a great way to do it. Or Canva. Canva has a great e-zine one that you can use. Some vodcasts, if your students are doing a doing video news, they'll really like teleprompter.com. It's free software, works on any device. It has scripts. You can even add images. It helps your students with their speaking ability. It helps them to change the words in their writing for speaking. So it has tons and tons of features, and it's free. There's also free teleprompter.org, where it'll just read on the screen. So what you do is you set up the computer, one computer that has the script that they already wrote, they corrected, they edited, they summarized. This is after they do all the research. And then it'll read it out loud, and you have that in the background while you're filming them. Or also they have it for if they're recording a podcast. So the best one I think is the teleprompter one, but free teleprompter is also very good. Touchcast. So if you do use apps, Touchcast is the best app for reporting the news. It actually lets you put links within the video. It actually lets you play little videos. So they could actually take another YouTube video of, let's say they're reporting on the news around the world. They can take a little news clip from a YouTube video they found, and they can embed that while they are speaking on the screen. So it's really, really cool. It's a free, of course, all of these things that I show you have a free resource. It has a green screen. So if you just put like a green blanket or something in the background, you can insert an image and make it seem like they're anywhere in the world. It's very, very cool. It's very inexpensive. You don't need a lot for a green screen. A green screen means that you can put anything in the background. Like, for example, instead of these bricks, you could have put the Eiffel Tower. You could put, you know, a flag. You could put a place around the world, and you can change that often. So that's very cool for the news. You can also, and of course, they can't wear green. If you don't want them to show their faces, then you can do Talking Ben and Tom News. It's iOS and an Android app as well. Well, I don't know if it's Android anymore. You might have to check that. I don't have Android anymore. Now it doesn't list Android on the side. It lists Amazon Fire. So you'll have to check. I think they still have it, but they just don't list it on the site. They can upload their own news video. It's a very short reel. We call it REEL, which is a news reel. And you can teach them the lingo as well. So when you do the news, they can whatever they record, it shows here, and then they have Ben or Tom, the cat, and they pick on each other, and they can make them read the news. So whatever they say is what Ben or Tom will say. They just touch on the character, and then they report the news. Some of these resources in some countries, unfortunately, might be region restricted. It does depend on the country that you're in. And that's always a problem with some of the resources, is you never know which. I know one of somebody on Facebook keeps telling me that my website is unavailable to her in China. So depending where you are in the world, yeah, I think so, that maybe in some countries it may not be available. There's digital research. Here's a really good one for kids. It's an interactive way. And you can find out more if you look under shellyturtle.com/research. And then you can see our webinar on that as well. If you go to americantesol.com, you'll actually see this and so much more information on how to teach digital research. Interviews, your students can interview others. The great place to be able to find out how to do great interviews and come up with the questions for interviews is storycorps.org. They also have very short listenings. The listenings are about a minute, 2 minutes, and then they have what makes a good question. This is actually something that my students are learning next week and the next following weeks is we're using StoryCorps and we're learning how to conduct interviews for an argumentative essay that we're doing. So StoryCorps is a really great website that has this. It's also online as a podcast, so you can carry this on your mobile device. And of course, I have lots of news-related scripts, news-related. Over here, I have a whole entire lesson plan in the news that gives you rubrics, how to grade, how to get your students to summarize the information, and just everything. How to write their own scripts. It looks like this. And so you can find that in my book, Learn to Go. And that's it. So thank you so much for coming today. You can find the resources at shellyturtle.com/news, or you can go to the American TESOL website and you can find webinars that we've done on reporting the news, and also all the sites that we've mentioned. We even have an article that we recently posted about 15 things about the news. So thank you so much, and I'm going to end the recording to make it as close to 30 minutes as possible. And we'll see you next week.